a lot of the issues that I think were touched on earlier, and just in terms of people's, especially vulnerable people's access to justice, are problems they face on a daily basis in terms of running a paralegal office. So people being unrepresented, people not having money to get to the court, people getting to court, being told no, they must come back tomorrow, even though they have no taxi fare to come back tomorrow, and women, especially who are applying for maintenance, protection orders, and things like that, the court saying, oh, sorry, we're on T right now, you'll just have to come back tomorrow. You know, this woman's already traveled 100 kilometers to get to the court. She can't come back tomorrow. And so, in a way, the way that sort of arbitrary bureaucratic decisions actually deny people access to justice is a huge problem. So I think some of the issues that the law clinic was addressing are important to our work as well. But I just wanted to actually focus on just a small issue, since the time is short, and the issue that Anne was, or the discussion was about, in terms of conflicts between what we sort of see, or not what we see, but what are women's constitutional rights or international human rights, and the conflict that comes when communities are unwilling or have other beliefs that contradict with those rights. So I just wanted to quickly give two examples, and then maybe they might be relevant for people to just discuss. But one example is that our Melmoth project, we run a project up in Melmoth, which is actually, I've been thinking about you being in Zululand, but that project works with traditional leaders, or it started as a project working with traditional leaders and now has expanded. But it was working with traditional leaders around helping to train them about family law legislation, and in particular women's rights in terms of family law legislation. So we were looking at the Sexual Offenses Act, we were looking at marriage and divorce law, we were looking at domestic violence, maintenance, inheritance, those issues. And one of the things that I think is important to note is that the traditional leaders, although they are on a daily basis arbitrating these disputes around family conflicts and communities, they had never actually been given any training by anyone on legislation, in particular women's rights legislation. So I think, and to date, very few traditional leaders have ever been trained on the Domestic Violence Act, on maintenance, on inheritance, the Intestate Succession Act, other pieces of legislation which they are directly involved with arbitrating disputes about, and yet they've never actually been trained on the law. So they're applying customary law, which is their jurisdiction, but they should also be informed about their duty also to enforce constitutional protections for women and children. And so I think part of the resistance is that people lack the knowledge and information. So I'll just give you an example. One of the issues that was raised in the discussions with traditional leaders and community members was the issue, for example, in a Sexual Offenses Act, that a woman can be raped by her husband. Okay, so that was an issue that got a lot of discussion, and there was a lot of feeling that no, that wasn't true. Even if the law said that, it doesn't matter. We don't believe that. Okay, because if you're married, you have a right to have sex with your wife. Right, so if she agrees or disagrees or whatever, it's like, you know, so if she finds out that you've been having sex with another woman, she's concerned that you might have HIV, she wants you to wear a condom, you say no and you force her to have sex, that's not rape. Okay, so legally that's rape, community says it's not rape. So how do you, so I guess those are the issues when we're coming in and sort of saying this is what the law says, the community's saying we don't care, or not the community, but certain people who have a lot of power in the community are saying we don't accept that. And I think this also goes to the conversation we were having yesterday. I'm not sure, I think some of you were a part, but it was about participation and participatory development. And one of the principles in that is that you allow the community to decide which issues they want to take on, that it's a community-led process. And I think a challenge as an organization working on a rights-based approach is that sometimes you are coming in with an agenda that's not necessarily I think it's an agenda that certain marginalized people in the community would like you to bring, but other people don't want you to bring it. And so it's a because if the traditional leaders say, get out of here, pound sand, Amber, you're never allowed to come back into this area again, then you've lost. And so you have to build a relationship of trust, but it's a constant balancing act to listen to someone, and to say, you have a right to that view, but I also want you to listen to the other side of the argument and to consider another point of view. And so how do you facilitate spaces? For us, the challenge is, how do you facilitate a space where you can discuss these issues, because they're very personal issues. People feel very strongly. They have really heated opinions about these issues. It threatens cultural practice and identity to some extent, or people feel that it does. I don't always agree with that. But how do you facilitate a space where people can have conversations about really difficult issues around, particularly women's rights and gender issues, because especially issues around gay and lesbian people get very angry and have very strong feelings when you're talking to groups of people about rights of people who are gay or lesbian women. So it's important to talk about those, but we always say, how do you make sure in those spaces that you don't just actually harden people's attitudes, that you're not just actually providing a platform for people to harden discriminatory attitudes, that you're actually creating a space where you're opening a willingness to maybe reconsider or think about things in a new way, that you're not actually just making it worse. Because I think when you're talking about these really emotional, strong feeling issues, that you have to be very careful in the way you do this work, especially around gender, that we're actually making it better and not worse. So I think that's a challenge as a practitioner working on these issues. And so I just gave the example of, coming in with a women's rights agenda, which might be different from a certain aspect of community agenda around, we talked about rape and marital rape. And the other issue that I would give an example of that's been very, that has a lot of energy, a lot of sort of tension, is around women's inheritance rights. And because of HIV/AIDS, it's a huge issue because so many people are dying. And so a huge issue around women's ability to access and control property when their partner dies. So a man's family coming in and taking all the property away from the women and the children. A woman having to make the decision about whether she's going to then assume sort of take on her brother-in-law or become a wife to her husband's brother as a way of securing her and her children's right to property. How that might compromise her in terms of a lot of times women don't want